I always thought needing space was something people said when they were trying to be polite about leaving you. Like when someone quits a job and says, "I just need to explore other opportunities," even though everyone knows they got fired. So when my wife, Ellie, stood in our kitchen with her arms crossed over her chest and said she needed a little privacy, a little break from everything, I figured we'd had an argument I didn't remember. But we hadn't fought. Not really. We argued like any married couple does, over bills, thermostat settings, whether or not she liked how I chewed. But nothing explosive. Nothing break-worthy. She stood by the fridge that morning, the one with our anniversary photo magnet right to the middle of it, Lake Tahoe, 6 years ago, smiling with wind-tangled hair and sunglasses too big for her face. She wouldn't look me in the eyes. Just stared at the floor like there was something interesting in the cracks between the tiles. "I just need to think," she said, brushing past me, grabbing her tote bag and car keys. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I wanted to ask what this even was, but she was out the door before I could get the words out. That night, I slept on my side of the bed, fully clothed, staring at the empty space where she should have been. The lamp was still on her nightstand. Her hairbrush was still tucked into the drawer. Her pillow still had the faint smell of her shampoo. Coconut and mint. Like a beach resort. And then, 3 days later, like some sick joke, she posted the pictures. It was around 2 a.m., and I was scrolling through my phone, checking her Facebook again. I'd been refreshing her page every couple hours like a damn teenager. And there they were, photos from what looked like a luxury resort in Tulum. The kind of place you only see in magazines or when you've been stupid enough to Google beachfront honeymoon suite during a midlife crisis. Ellie was in a bikini I didn't recognize, laughing with her mouth open, her arms draped around 2 shirtless men. Both of them younger than me. One had tattoos up his arms, the other wore a woven necklace like he'd just come off a surfboard. In one photo, she kissed one of them. In another, she held hands with the other one as they walked down a shoreline at sunset. The caption said, "Sometimes you gotta choose happiness." I threw my phone across the room. It hit the closet door with a hollow clack and skidded under the dresser. Happiness? Private escape? Was that what I was? A prison? For the next few days, I drifted around the house like a ghost. Didn't go to work. Didn't eat more than half a Pop-Tart a day. The curtains stayed drawn. The dog barked at me. Even she didn't seem to recognize me anymore. It wasn't just that she left. It was the way she smiled in those photos. Like I never existed. And I couldn't live with that. I told myself I just wanted to see her again. Talk to her. Understand why she left the way she did. But the truth was simpler, colder, and darker than that. I needed her back. And I couldn't get her back with those 2 still breathing. I hadn't left the house in 4 days. Not unless you count the steps to the mailbox, where the bills kept piling up like nobody told the electric company my life had been ripped to pieces. I sat in Ellie's recliner most days, the one with the worn patch on the left arm where she used to rest her elbow. The room still smelled faintly like her skin cream. Or maybe I just imagined it. The pictures kept replaying in my head, Ellie laughing in the surf, her lips pressed against that tattooed surfer's neck, her legs tangled around the other one like they'd been rehearsing it for months. I tried telling myself they were just flings. A midlife rebellion. Something she'd regret by next Thursday. But something about her eyes in those photos, it wasn't rebellion. It was relief. That smile didn't have a trace of guilt in it. That's what broke me. I opened her Instagram next. She hadn't blocked me. Bold move. Maybe she didn't think I'd care enough to look. She had posted videos, 2 short clips of them in a cabana, sipping some fancy cocktail with little paper umbrellas in it. One of the guys, tattoo guy, called her babe. She didn't correct him. I knew then I couldn't just sit around and let this happen. My wife, my Ellie, was down in Mexico playing goddess with a pair of sunburned meatheads, and here I was drinking flat beer and sweating on a vinyl couch. I pulled up my laptop and started digging. It wasn't hard to figure out where she was. One of the geotags on her story led me to a boutique hotel called Sol del Alma. A 5-star jungle retreat, just far enough off the beaten path that privacy was a feature, not a flaw. Perfect for cheating wives and their rebound gym buddies. I booked the first flight I could afford with what was left on my emergency credit card. Round trip, just in case she wanted to come home with me. I even packed one of her sweaters. The green one she always wore when she was cold on airplanes. I told myself I was just going to talk. Maybe plead a little. Remind her who she used to be with me. Maybe I could still save us. Maybe she just got lost for a little while. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. By the time I landed in Cancun, a different thought had taken root in my mind. I could never live without her. And I wasn't going home until those 2 men were out of her life for good. The cab ride from Cancun to the retreat was long, bumpy, and hotter than sin. The air conditioner barely worked, and the driver kept humming along to a tinny pop song playing from his cracked phone speaker. I didn't care. I stared out the window the whole time, watching the green blur of palm trees and roadside taco shacks slide past, clutching the strap of my backpack like it held my last ounce of sanity. When we pulled into the dirt drive that led to Sol del Alma, I felt something between a pulse and a panic attack. The place looked exactly like it did in Ellie's stories: white stone walls, hammocks between trees, lush jungle pressing in on all sides like it was trying to swallow the resort whole. It was paradise, sure. The kind of place she'd always dreamt of visiting. I paid the driver and stepped out into the heat, sweat already rolling down my back. I wasn't dressed for this: jeans and a faded gray t-shirt, heavy boots from back home in Missouri. I looked like a lost contractor in a wellness retreat. But I didn't come here to fit in. The front desk girl smiled when I walked in. "Bienvenidos," she said sweetly, and I forced a nod. I told her I didn't have a reservation, but I was hoping to check in anyway, just for a couple nights. She tapped at her keyboard, smiled, handed me a key to Casita 7. Ellie was in Casita 3. I'd seen it in the mirror behind her in one of her posts. There was a little wooden placard on the door with the number, clear as day if you knew what to look for. I waited until dusk. Walked the winding stone paths with my hands in my pockets, casual as I could manage. No one paid me any mind. Couples kissed in hammocks. Some guy was doing yoga under a thatched pavilion. I kept walking, head down. And then I saw her. Through the sheer curtain of Casita 3, I saw her shape. She walked from the bathroom to the bed, wearing a white robe, sipping from a wine glass. One of the men, necklace guy, walked up behind her, shirtless, arms wrapped around her waist. She turned and kissed him like I used to dream she'd kiss me again someday. I stood there in the shadows for a long while, invisible. Just breathing. Just burning. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid on the creaky mattress in my rented room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow propeller. I kept seeing her face from the photos. That smile. That look in her eyes. She wasn't lost. She had chosen this. And I wasn't about to let that choice stick. I spent the next day shadowing them. From a distance, sure, but close enough. I learned their routine: breakfast on the veranda, yoga at 10, beach walk around 2, drinks in the plunge pool around 5. Like clockwork. That night, I watched them stumble out toward the jungle path that led to the cenote, a deep sinkhole pool in the forest. One of the staff had mentioned it earlier. Private. Secluded. Most tourists didn't go there after dark. But they did. They laughed too loud. One of them was drunk. Ellie swatted a mosquito off her shoulder, giggling, holding one lover's hand while the other carried a bottle of tequila like a trophy. I followed them in silence. The moon lit the path in patches, filtering through the jungle canopy. My boots crunched on dry leaves. I slowed my breath. Steadied my nerves. At the edge of the cenote, they all sat down to drink and strip. Ellie dipped her feet in the water. I watched from behind a tree, maybe 30 yards away. The men kissed her neck, one on each side. She tilted her head back, eyes closed, lost in it. That was the last time they'd ever see the sky. The cenote was deeper than I expected. I'd read about them back in school, natural sinkholes, formed when limestone collapsed and opened up into an underground river. The ancient Maya believed they were sacred. Places where spirits passed between worlds. Felt fitting, really. I stayed in the trees until the laughter turned to groans, one of them stumbling off to take a leak, the other kissing Ellie while she waded thigh-deep into the water. The moonlight caught her hair just right. For a second, I almost forgot what she'd done. Almost believed we were back home, and I was watching her rinse off after a long day in the garden. But then Necklace Guy called her baby doll, and the illusion shattered. I moved quick, silent. I'd spent all day prepping, walking the path, timing the sounds. I knew how long I had. Knew where the branches snapped underfoot and where they didn't. The drunk one, tattoo guy, was leaning against a tree, facing away from the trail. I came up behind him with a rock. Big, heavy. The kind meant for cracking coconuts or heads. He didn't even grunt. Just folded into himself and dropped. The other one was in the water with Ellie, both waist-deep and careless. I stayed low, slipped down the side slope until I was right behind them. When I grabbed him from behind, he let out a surprised grunt, just before I slammed his head against the jagged rock near the pool's edge. Twice. He stopped moving. The water around him went pink. Ellie screamed. She backed away fast, nearly tripping over her own feet. I was breathing hard, not from the effort but the heat of it, rage, pain, grief, love all tangled together in my chest like barbed wire. She looked up at me with wide eyes, hands shaking. "Why are you here?" she asked. "What did you do?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked. The woman I had married. The one who used to trace circles on my chest after we made love. The one who whispered, "forever," when no one was listening. Now she was just another stranger in a place she never belonged. "I came to bring you home," I said, voice low. "You killed them," she whispered. "No," I said, "I freed you." I dragged their bodies, one at a time, heavy and limp, toward the edge of the cenote. The old Mayans weren't wrong, it really did feel like something sacred. That darkness down there, swallowing the moonlight whole. There was no bottom you could see. No splash when they finally hit water. Just silence. A deep, eternal silence. Ellie stood frozen. Pale. Wet. Eyes locked on me. "You loved them," I said. "But you forgot what love really means. You left me, Ellie. You smiled like I never existed. You laughed while I died inside." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "I'm not mad anymore," I added, stepping closer. "Not really. Just tired of being erased." She stumbled backward, slipped in the mud, caught herself. I didn't move. I didn't need to. "I didn't ask you to do this," she said, her voice breaking. "No," I nodded. "You just made it necessary." The sound of night insects filled the jungle again, like nothing had happened. Like it was any other humid evening in paradise. I looked down into the well one more time. I didn't feel peace. Not yet. But I felt something else. Something close. She wouldn't speak to me on the walk back to the resort. Barefoot, trembling, her robe soaked and clinging to her legs, Ellie just kept walking ahead of me on the narrow jungle path. I didn't try to stop her. She was in shock, but she wasn't running, not yet. I figured she didn't know where she'd go if she did. I let her breathe. By the time we reached the back of her casita, she stopped and finally turned to face me. Her face was pale, streaked with sweat and tears. Still beautiful. Still the woman I'd fallen in love with years ago in a coffee shop on Main Street, back when she used to write poems on napkins and laugh at everything I said, even when it wasn't funny. But something in her was gone now. "You don't think this changes anything?" she asked quietly. "Of course it does," I said. "It changes everything." "No, it doesn't," she snapped, voice rising. "You think I'll forget what I saw? What you did? You'll understand," I said. "Eventually." Ellie laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Understand? That you murdered 2 people? That you came all the way down here, stalked me, and dumped them in a pit?" "They were in the way," I said, calmly. "You weren't thinking clearly. You were hurt, lost. They took advantage of that." "You don't get to decide that," she screamed. The lights from a nearby cabana flickered on. Someone had heard her. A door creaked open. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Ellie, you can scream all night, but nobody down here speaks enough English to care. You think the hotel wants this getting out? Bad press. Police in Mexico don't ask questions, they collect bribes and make problems disappear." Her eyes darted toward the path like she was trying to decide whether she could outrun me. "You're not a prisoner," I said, softening my tone. "You're my wife. I didn't come here to hurt you. I came here to fix this. We can still leave together." "To what?" she hissed. "A life built on blood and secrets?" "We already had that," I said. "You just didn't see it." She sat down on the steps, covered her face with her hands, and started to cry. For the first time in days, I felt tired. Not just the kind of tired from walking miles in the heat or dragging bodies through mud. I mean soul tired. Like something inside me had gone hollow and was echoing with the sound of everything I'd lost. Maybe I thought taking out those 2 men would somehow put the pieces back together. But the truth was clearer now. Ellie wasn't coming back to me. No matter what I did. The next morning, she was gone. Vanished before sunrise, her robe still hanging from the wooden peg by the door. I searched the jungle paths, checked the front desk, asked the maid in broken Spanish. Nobody saw her leave. No one heard her go. She had disappeared as quietly as she had entered my life. And for the first time in my life, I felt afraid. Not for her. For what she might become now. For hours, I walked the resort grounds like a ghost. The morning sun was rising over the trees, casting long shadows across the cobblestone paths, but nothing looked the same anymore. Not the jungle, not the flowers, not the people stretching on yoga mats or sipping coffee by the pool. The world had shifted. Something sacred had been broken in the dirt, and I was the one who snapped it. And Ellie was gone. No note. No call. No sign she'd even existed here, apart from her robe and the faint trace of her perfume on the pillow. Her suitcase was gone too. I checked the front desk again, asked if she'd checked out, if she'd booked a car to the airport. The girl behind the counter just gave me a polite shrug. "No record," she said in that soft tourist voice. Maybe she'd leave with a friend? Maybe. Maybe she'd run. Or maybe she was watching me. By noon I was back in Casita 3, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the spot where she'd slept between them. The blood under my fingernails had washed away, but not the ache in my chest. I wasn't sure what I expected. That we'd board a plane hand in hand? That she'd cry into my shirt and thank me for rescuing her? That we'd start over? Stupid. I leaned back on the bed, arms spread wide, and just stared at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me. I kept seeing her eyes from last night, those wide, tear-soaked eyes. Not terrified exactly, but cold. Like something in her had shut off the moment she saw what I was. That's what haunted me now. I didn't just lose her. She saw who I truly was, and stepped back into the dark without a word. Later that day, I took a walk through the back trail near the cenote again. Not because I needed to, but because I couldn't help myself. I had to know if someone had found anything. If the bodies had risen or floated or made a sound in the night. But the jungle was quiet. No sirens. No questions. No search teams. They were still down there. And they'd stay there forever. I stood at the edge of that black mouth in the earth, listening. Not a ripple. Not a whisper. Just silence and the drone of insects. I did it for you, I said out loud. You belonged with me. Not with them. The trees didn't answer. That night, I dreamed of her. Not Ellie exactly, but a version of her, naked, barefoot, hair wet from the cenote, walking toward me with a blank face and something sharp in her hand. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She just raised her arms slowly as the jungle closed in behind her like a curtain. I woke up drenched in sweat. And that's when I saw the envelope. It had been slipped under my door. No hotel stamp. No markings. Just my name, written in her handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I never belonged to you. You can't bury what you don't own. That was it. No apology. No goodbye. Just a sentence that rang louder in my ears than any scream ever could. She was out there. Somewhere. And she wasn't afraid of me. I sat on the bed with that note in my hand for over an hour, just staring at it. I never belonged to you. You can't bury what you don't own. It wasn't just a message. It was a final nail, one she hammered in without touching me. I'd come here with this idea in my head that if I could just cut out the infection, the wound would heal. Like she was something sick that needed saving, and I was the cure. But she'd made it clear, I wasn't the cure. I was the disease. I didn't check out that morning. I just packed my things and left the room the same way I found it, bland, white, too clean for what had happened inside my head. I walked to the cenote one last time, not to check on the bodies this time, but to tell it goodbye. I stood at the edge and imagined her standing here too, barefoot again, holding that glass of wine, laughing at something one of them said. And then I pictured her watching me from the trees. I didn't know where she went after that note, but I started to wonder if she was even trying to hide. Maybe she wanted me to know she could vanish and I couldn't stop her. That she could step through hell, barefoot and free, and leave me to rot in the fire behind her. I flew home 2 days later, said nothing to anyone. No questions were asked at customs, no flags raised. I had brought no souvenirs, no smiles, no tan lines. Just silence. Back in Missouri, everything looked smaller. Grayer. The house was still ours, technically. Her things were gone, of course, closet empty, photos stripped from the walls, like she'd been erased with surgical precision. But the bones of her were still here. That smell in the bathroom. That tiny dent in the kitchen counter from where she dropped a cast iron pan during a fight. That drawer full of old greeting cards she forgot to take. I tried to move on, like people do. Watched TV without listening. Made toast and left it uneaten. Walked circles in the driveway. Answered texts with one-word replies. Nobody suspected a thing. But she was still there. In my dreams. In my bones. One night I saw her again, not in the flesh, but in my sleep. She stood across the room from me, soaked in moonlight, face unreadable. I asked her, "Why did you leave?" and she only smiled, lifting her finger to her lips. Then she opened her hand and showed me something, 2 gold chains, tangled together. The next morning, I checked the local news. Nothing about tourists missing in Mexico. No headlines. No red alerts. But there was a story. A man found dead in a hotel bathroom, wrist slit, note on the mirror written in lipstick. "She's not yours." The name wasn't one I recognized. But the story sent ice down my spine. It happened in Nevada. Small roadside inn. Staff said he checked in alone. Left no luggage. The security camera footage was conveniently corrupted. They ruled it a suicide. But I knew better. I knew her. I stopped sleeping after that. Every night, I sat by the window in my dim little kitchen, staring out at the yard like I expected her to come walking up the path. I kept the porch light on. I left the door unlocked. Not out of hope, no, that had died somewhere between the cenote and the airport. I left it open because part of me knew she might come back. And not for love. For something else. I thought about that man in Nevada. The one with the lipstick message. "She's not yours." I didn't know him, hadn't seen his face. But the style was unmistakable. Ellie had her own language now, her own signature carved in blood and whispers. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped hiding. She was making a trail. And maybe I was meant to follow. I started reading more news. Not the major networks. Small-town papers. Obituaries. Reports that didn't make the national rounds. I had a list by the end of the week, 6 men, all found dead across 4 states. Single travelers. Quiet check-ins. No luggage. No one came to claim them. A few had hotel rooms vandalized with lipstick notes. 2 had necklaces jammed in their mouths. I knew what that meant. The gold chains from the cenote. Her 2 lovers. She was returning their memory to the world in the only way she knew how, by recreating what had been taken from her. Not grief. Not sadness. Something darker. Vengeful. Precise. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. And deep down, I knew the truth. This was still about me. One night, I drove out to the edge of town, to the old gas station we used to stop at before road trips. I sat in the car for an hour, engine off, watching the shadows slide across the pavement. I remembered her leaning over the hood, twisting her hair into a bun, smiling at me through aviators. That version of Ellie was gone. But something about the memory still hurt. It was almost midnight when I finally went inside. There was a woman at the counter. Young, bored, thumbing through her phone. I asked, "You get many travelers late at night?" She shrugged. "Sometimes. Truckers. Weirdos. Couples fighting. You ever see a woman come through? Alone. Long hair. Quiet. Might ask for matches instead of a lighter." The girl blinked. "Yeah. Like 2 nights ago. Real quiet. Paid in cash. Didn't buy gas." I felt the chill run up my neck. Did she leave anything behind? The girl chewed her lip, then pointed toward the back. "Check the bathroom. I didn't clean it yet. I think she left her scarf on the hook." I walked slow, every step feeling heavier. And sure enough, there it was. A red silk scarf. I picked it up, hands trembling. It still smelled like her. And pinned to it, with a single rusted safety pin, was a hotel room key, no chain, no tag, just the number 9 scratched in black ink. She wanted me to find it. She wanted me to come. Ellie wasn't running from me anymore. She was calling me in. And God help me, I was going. I drove through the night. No GPS. Just a frayed road map I hadn't touched in years, the red scarf draped across the passenger seat, and that room key cold in my palm. I didn't need directions. I knew where she wanted me to go. The town was small, the kind you don't notice even when you're looking straight at it. No stoplights, no chain stores. Just a diner, a post office, and a single-story motel off the highway, its neon sign buzzing like a dying insect. Sunset Pines, it read, though there wasn't a pine tree in sight. I pulled in just after 4 a.m. No other cars. No movement. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. I stepped into the lobby, where a little bell sat on the desk and the overhead lights flickered like a warning. No one was at the counter. Just a dusty guest log and a candy dish full of ancient peppermints. I didn't sign in. I didn't need a receipt. Room 9 was at the far end of the row, lights off, curtains drawn. The key slid into the lock with a soft click, like it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside. At first, I thought it was empty. The bed was made. Lamps off. No sign of life. Then I saw it, a trail of muddy footprints, small and bare, leading from the door to the bathroom. The mirror was fogged. The sink was running. The air smelled like perfume and rust. And then I saw the message, scrawled on the mirror in red. You followed. So now you know. My throat went dry. There was something under the bed. I don't know how I knew, I just did. That pull in your chest when your gut tells you you're not alone. I dropped to my knees, heart thudding, and lifted the dust ruffle. There was a man stuffed underneath. Eyes wide open. Mouth gagged. Still breathing. He flinched when he saw me, blood smeared across his face, a single gold chain wrapped tight around his wrist like a shackle. Ellie had left me a gift. Not a kill. A choice. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at my hands. They'd done things now. Real things. Things you don't come back from. And she knew it. She was testing me. Pushing me. Seeing how far I'd go to chase the version of her I couldn't let go of. But this was different. This man was still alive. I looked back down at him. He couldn't have been more than 30. Shaking. Crying behind the tape. Terrified out of his mind. And I realized, I wasn't angry at him. He wasn't one of the lovers. He was just, picked. Like bait. Because Ellie wasn't killing men out of rage anymore. She was doing it for art. I stood up, yanked him out by the arms, and dragged him to the bathroom. Sat him in the tub. Ripped the tape off his mouth. Who are you? I asked. He sobbed. I don't know. I met her at the diner. She was nice. She bought me pie. I thought, Jesus, man, I thought she was just lonely. Yeah, I whispered. She is. I cut him loose and told him to run. He didn't ask twice. By the time I walked back out to the parking lot, the sun was starting to rise. Pink clouds stretching over the mountains. The world looking normal again, like it hadn't just coughed up a demon and called her my wife. I sat on the hood of my car, staring at the road. No sign of her. But I knew she was watching. Somewhere out there, in the mirror of a truck stop bathroom, or a train station bench, or maybe standing barefoot in a motel hallway, she was smiling. She knew I let him go. She knew I still had a soul left to burn. And she was coming for it. I didn't go home after room 9. I drove for days, windows down, the red scarf hanging from the rearview mirror like some kind of cursed flag. I didn't eat much. Didn't sleep much either. Just drove, thinking. About the man in the tub. About the cenote. About the chain of quiet deaths trailing her across the country like footprints in ash. I told myself I was looking for her. But the truth was, I didn't need to find her. She already knew where I'd be. It happened in a town that barely had a name. One of those desert patches with a single motel, a dusty diner, and a church that looked like it hadn't heard a prayer since the Eisenhower administration. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the cracked TV screen, when I heard the knock. Soft. 3 taps. I didn't even ask who it was. I just opened the door. There she stood. Ellie. Hair longer now. Sun-kissed. Freckles dusting her nose. Dressed in a plain white sundress, barefoot like always, as if her feet never forgot the jungle. In her left hand was a small leather bag. In her right, a single match. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. She walked past me, dropped the bag on the bed, and sat down like we'd never been apart. I thought you were dead, I finally said. I was, she said quietly. You killed me. I looked at the match in her fingers. You came back. I didn't, she said. You kept digging. We sat in silence. Just breathing. 2 ghosts with matching hearts. I let the man go, I said. The one you left me. I know, she said. That's why I'm here. I turned to her. Why are you doing this? She looked down at the leather bag. Unzipped it. Inside was a small stack of Polaroids, faces of the men she'd lured, posed like memories in places that no longer existed. Motel mirrors. Canyon edges. Picnic benches stained with wine and blood. Each one was smiling. None of them were you, she said. None of them saw me. Ellie, I said, voice trembling, you need help. No, she whispered, I needed a witness. That's when I understood. She wasn't running from me. She was circling back. Bringing me closer with each kill, each breadcrumb, each echo of what we used to be. She was making a story, and I was her ending. I closed the bag. What happens now? She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was the 2 of us. Young. Happy. Standing in front of the cenote, years before all this. Before the lovers. Before the lies. Before the blood. I want to go back, she said. I nodded. I buried them for you, I told her. But I think I buried myself too. She looked at me then. Not with anger. Not with love. With something in between. Something tired and sad and pure. We can't live here anymore, she said. I know. That night, we drove back to Mexico. No tickets. No plan. Just the 2 of us and the road, pulling us toward the one place that still remembered who we used to be. We arrived at dawn. The cenote hadn't changed. Still dark. Still deep. Still waiting. Ellie didn't speak as she slipped off her shoes, stepped to the edge, and stared down into the place where her sins had been buried. And mine. She turned to me one last time. You don't have to follow. I said nothing. She jumped. And I followed. The water swallowed us both. And for the first time in forever, everything was quiet. No more rooms. No more keys. No more ghosts. Just the dark. And her.